On today's show, the Dallas Mavericks need to do 5 things this season. They've got a to-do list, and I'm going to tell you exactly what they need to check off on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
You are Locked On Mavs.
Great, Rusty.
Your daily Dallas Mavericks podcast.
No one's dying.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Amazing.
Your team every day.
Still can't even help it.
And welcome. You are Locked On to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On Mavs your first listen today. Best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day on any podcast platform. Leave a 5-star review. Like the video on YouTube. Comment anything below. Let me know what's one thing the Mavericks need to do this regular season. They have to do during the regular season. Let me know in the comment section on YouTube, Spotify, all that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's episode, I want to talk about a couple of things the Mavericks need to do this season. They need to test player capabilities and push guys further. And so I'll talk about a couple players like that. They also need to find a closing lineup. So I'll talk about that. I want to really dive into that and how Jason Kidd does that and who's in that and all that. And they also need to figure out a streaming service, which anybody interested in that? We'll talk about the Mavs on WFAA and the Tegna deal and all that kind of stuff. And I'll answer some questions about that. But let's start here. Wow, that little dropout could not have come at a better time. Let's start here. I didn't drop the music there, literally just the timing. Let's start here. The Mavericks regular season. A lot of the conversations we've had this offseason, this summer, have been about playoff problems, right? I went on my whole rant. I've done it a couple times now, but I'll do it right now. On the Dereck Jones Jr. to Klay Thompson to Najee Marshall transition and all that. One of the things about putting Klay Thompson in the starting lineup for Dereck Jones Jr., the defense is going to fall off so much. And yes, I've talked about this. I've asked the question. I think it's a fair question to ask about that specific lineup. But that question itself is a playoff question. The Mavs during the regular season will be in a great spot in order to figure out how that works. Klay Thompson, I think, will be enough of an offensive, push forward compared to what Dereck Jones Jr. was to offset whatever defensive lapse there is there. Now, is the defense going to be good enough as it was going to be as good as it was last year with Klay Thompson instead of Dereck Jones Jr.? That's a different question that we can talk about. But again, it's a playoff question. We've been so used to these playoff questions over and over again. Can Luka handle the burden? Can Luka be healthy? Who's playable? Who's not? You start talking about players like, Dante Exum, can't even play him. All right, well, he was pretty good last year in the regular season. Playoff question versus regular season question. And so you start to go through, all right, what's a playoff question? What's a regular season question? And let's switch our brains over to what's the regular season. For the Mavericks, they have some things they need to do this regular season. It's a long regular season, 82 games plus extras if you make the play-in tournament and do all that. You've got an all-star break in there. You've got a trade deadline. You've got Christmas games. You've got all kinds of stuff in this regular season. It's a long way. And you and I are going to spend the whole thing together. Every single game, every day, we're going to be going through. We'll do a bunch of draft dash and playoff dash and do a bunch of shows in a row. We are going to spend a lot of time together over the next however many months, right? Till April, October to April. Insane. And so the Mavericks have some things they absolutely need to do during that time. You've got this whole long, extended regular season, 82 games plus. What do they need to do? Number one, all this buildup, all that time to get to this. They've got to win. Win. But they've got to win to a certain level. To me, that's the first priority in all this, is to win games. All the other things that I'm going to talk about are secondary. You've got to figure out the best way to win games because I think the Mavericks need to get home court advantage for the playoffs. So I kind of cheated when I was like, all right, what do they need to do? Let's ask regular season questions. The regular season will lead to the playoffs. So they've got to win enough games to get home court. I think that's one of the first things the Mavs need to do on their must-do list. Get home court advantage. Be in the top 4 in the West. I think that's definitely doable for the Dallas Mavericks, but get home court for the playoffs, win enough games. And honestly, another thing about winning is to win enough games for Luka to win MVP. That's been the only thing holding him back. Regular season wins. Last year, they get to 50. SGA's team gets to 57, and they're the number one team in the West. Jokic's team gets to 57, and they're tied for number one, but they end up being 2. And those 2 guys are ahead of Luka. We went through it all last year. All their numbers and all that are comparable across the board, unless you want to pull out the kitchen sink and those weird advanced stats that people make up. But the only thing holding him back is regular season wins. Get enough wins for him to be in the MVP conversation in a real way. Because his numbers are going to be there and all that. So win enough to get home court, win enough for Luka to win MVP, win. That's the main thing I think that they need to focus on. Very obvious, yes, I know, but that's the number one priority for the Mavericks. The other one, while you're doing that, right, the walk and chew gum at the same time situation, find a closing lineup. For the Dallas Mavericks, I think we all have come to accept the starting lineup is going to be Luka, Kyrie, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, and Dereck Lively. Could be Gaffer. We'll see what happens with training camp. We'll see what Kid decides. Sometimes he does those Ted Lasso moves where he's like, I'm going to start the guy that's not as good as the other guy, and then do the man, like Lively's going to be the center Manu Ginobili, or something like that. But is the closing lineup going to be better with Klay Thompson or Najee Marshall? Do you need the dirty work wings both in there? Do you need the spacing of Klay Thompson more than you need a dirty work wing? Do you need more ball handling? And so maybe Spencer Dinwiddie finds his way in there. I don't know. I don't think so. I think to me at this point, the starting lineup is probably going to be the closing lineup because I do believe in Klay Thompson's defense enough that for stretches during a game, he can guard at a good enough level. Is it going to be a near elite level for a whole game or for a whole playoff game? I don't think so. And that's why I've been asking this question all summer. Can he defend at a high enough level? But I do think that there's going to be times when, all right, last 5 minutes of the game, Klay's not played until he's played 20 minutes or something like that. We need you to play 5 minutes of elite-ish defense. Can he still do it? I think he can, and so that's why I think that he'll end up being in that closing lineup. They'll need his three-point shot. They'll need his spacing. They'll need what he adds to this team. But I think Najee Marshall could make a case for himself. Najee Marshall does a lot of things on the basketball court. I think he defends really well. Last year, he shot the ball really well from 3. He doesn't take a lot of them. He only took 2.3 a game last year in 19 minutes. So if you do that, per 36, he took like 4 threes a game. Well, that's kind of what Derrick Jones Jr. did last season. So can he just be the one-to-one? With the Mavs, we've already seen that this can work. This formula can work. 2 dirty work wings, Luka, Kyrie, and a rolling center. It works. It worked when it was Luka, Brunson, the Bang Bros, and it was Dwight Powell in the middle. It worked then. It can work. And it worked to go to the NBA Finals last season. But they've got to figure out who's in that closing lineup. The other thing is, as much as we love Dereck Lively and as much as he has brought to this team and as much as I do believe he can close against anybody because we just saw him play in the NBA Finals, he had some issues with free throws, and we had that whole saga through the OKC series. And there have been times in the Mavericks that needed to close small. And as much as you want to bemoan Maxi Kleber's, still attendance on this roster, some of you, he was still good last season at times. The lineups with him were good. The spacing, the switching, all that. Do they decide to go small in some closing lineups? So I think that they need to figure out, at least by the end of the regular season, figure out who's your best closing lineup. Because we've gone into regular season, we got into playoffs a couple of years with Jason Kidd, not knowing who his best guys are. And maybe I take that a little bit farther, not figure out your closing lineup, figure out who your top 9 is. That's probably the other thing. That's actually probably more important. I probably should have thought about this a little bit more. Find who your top 9 guys are. Because the Mavericks did not know that going into the NBA, finals run last season. They got there despite it, but they did not know who their top 9 is. And it could have helped them to know who those guys were. Maybe they didn't have them, and maybe Jason Kidd just couldn't figure out who they were. Dante Exum got some time. Hardy got some time. Tim Hardaway was in and out of the lineup. They were just rifling through guys, it felt like. Figure out who those 9 guys are. Coming up. Things to take the Mavericks the next step, not just the obvious, but what do the Mavericks need to do in this regular season to take them the next step further? I'll tell you exactly what that is coming up.
Here.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has all kinds of props and odds and things that you can use to get in on the action. They have all kinds of stuff for the NFL. If you're watching games, man, Cowboys, great win for them the other day. You've heard us talk about FanDuel all season long, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we've got something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season, Sunday afternoon, out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account, current form of payment, cancel at any time. And that's not enough. FanDuel is also something special for our listeners this weekend. Be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use your FanDuel double winnings for all Sunday. Go check it out with the pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be available starting Friday. So check that out on the fan page, the account page. Just visit FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook, to figure out exactly what you can do with FanDuel. Take advantage of that FanDuel YouTube TV, NFL Sunday Ticket deal, all kinds of stuff on FanDuel. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. For your second listen today, check out Locked On NBA. Mondays, Jackson Gatlin has 3 different hosts that come in and answer different questions about the NBA, about their specific team. It's great stuff. If you want to deep dive into one specific team, or 3 different teams actually in each one of them, that's a great one on Monday. Wherever you're listening, watching this, Locked On NBA has you covered. I'm also on there on Thursdays. All right, Isaac, let's get into the other things the Mavericks need to do this offseason. A must-to-do list. I started pretty obvious. I started top player. They got to win. They got to find the closing lineup and find their top 9. That's my first 3. Find their top 9. Got to type that one out so I remember. I did that for later. Okay, next thing the Mavs need to do to take the step forward. Those are just establishing things, figure out who you are. Next thing they do is test new players' capabilities. You've got a bunch of new guys now on this team. And as much as we feel like we know, I know exactly who Klay Thompson is. I know exactly who Najee Marshall is coming in. We've all watched some highlights or footage on them. We've all looked through all their stats and all that kind of stuff. We feel like we know who these guys are. They're coming in with stuff we don't know. And I'll actually take that a step further and say, let's figure out what P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford are capable of. How many games did we see of P.J. Washington last season in a Mavericks jersey? We saw him play in the regular season 29 games, and then in the playoffs 22 games. We've only seen half a season worth of games of P.J. Washington. Do we know everything he's capable of? He jumps into the Mavericks. They have this rush to the playoffs where he's put in this role, and all of a sudden, he's not given any room to try and figure out who he can be. Then it's the playoffs where everything is squeezed and exacerbated, and all of a sudden he can't, try some stuff and do extra things because he's got to fit into this role. And then all of a sudden, different series ask for different things of him. So we're starting to see a little bit of that here and there. But with P.J. Washington recently, he was at a camp. A couple people went out there. And Kevin Gray posted this on his Twitter account about what P.J. Washington wants to do to take his game to another level. And his answer was, my ball handling, being able to rebound the ball and just push, being able to shoot off the dribble, just trying to be a better 3-level scorer and be a better playmaker. With Luka, Kyrie, and Klay Thompson and Dereck Lively out there, imagine P.J. Washington gets the ball. He's wide open. We've been talking about this all summer. He's going to get the most wide open threes on this Mavericks roster when he's in that lineup. Imagine if he could take the ball and push it a little bit. Drive to the rim, kick out, throw it up to Lively. That's one of the things that I wanted him to do in that Thunder series, is throw the lob. You don't have to just take that shot every time if somebody's going to come out and try and run out to you. If you're not confident in that shot, take a couple dribbles and throw the lob up. Kick out to Klay or Kyrie or Luka Doncic. Oh my gosh. With PJ with the ball, I think he may have the best 4 options on any team. It maybe you could say the Celtics still, but if you have the ball in your hands, you have to throw it to 4 players, one of 4 players. I think he may have the best 4 options in the NBA. So his ball handling, let's test that out. The Mavericks need to test that out this season. Him with the ball in his hands, him rebounding the ball and just pushing, not having to rebound the ball, stand there, wait, throw it to Luka, push the ball. The Mavs, one of the reasons why they were better last season is they wanted to push the pace. From training camp all the way through the playoffs and the finals, they talked about pushing the pace and pushing the tempo. And that was the thing they were successful on. They went from bottom 5 in the NBA to a top 10 pace team last season. It was kind of wild to see that they got that pushing forward. Part of that was Kyrie helping them. Part of that was Derrick Jones Jr. Part of that was Gafford and Lively, leaking out and doing all that kind of stuff. But with PJ Washington being able to help push that, I think that could help them a lot. And so the Mavs need to test that. Test that, see what he's capable of. And then maybe that's something that you implement a little bit later and implement in the playoffs, and all of a sudden this team becomes a little bit more dangerous. So offensively, this team was not, this team was struggling at times in the playoffs. So it'd be great to have some guys with some extra abilities that have been tested and that have been used and that are ready to go. The other thing with PJ Washington, Brian DeMare said this on his podcast with Mark Followill, is that the Mavericks have been messing with PJ Washington's jump shot in a good way. Messing was probably the wrong word. He said they completely retooled his shot to help raise his three-point percentage. The Mavs organization wanted to adjust his shot, and we saw some progress, especially in the OKC series and all that. PJ Washington's three-point shot is not something that's like a guaranteed thing. He shot 37% his first year, 39% his second year, 36% his third year, and then his fourth year, which was last season, he shot about 35%. It's like, okay. And then he was shooting 32% from three when the Mavericks traded for him, and then 31% in the regular season. Remember, we kept saying, man, he can't make any corner threes. That was the whole thing with PJ Washington. And then he goes in the playoffs and he shot 35%. Not great. He had some really good moments in the OKC series, obviously, where he hit, let's see, in the OKC series, he had a 5 of 11 game, a 5 of 12 game. He had a 7 of 11 game, and he had a 2 of 3 game from three. So yeah, he shot really well. They left him wide ass open, but he did have a really, really good shooting series against OKC. And so they need to test that capability, see if that shot is better. This is going to be maybe the easiest one on this whole list. Things that the Mavericks need to do, test PJ Washington's jump shot. He's going to get a ton of wide open shots. So I'm not worried about that in the slightest. Not worried about them being able to try that and push that. But we'll see what happens with it. So test their capabilities, test PJ Washington. In the same vein, test Najee Marshall. He's a guy, they call him the knife. He can do a bunch of different things, right? I mean, this is going to be a joke for a while, but
I'm talented at everything, to be honest. I can do it all, so you name it, I'm good at it. So
he can do it all. I think he can do it all. Now, that was a question about hidden talents and about him like being able to do stuff off the basketball court, but I think he's going to be able to come in and do a bunch of different things for the Mavericks. He can shoot, pass, dribble. He can score little floaters and runners. He can do a couple things here and there. You don't really want him to do a lot of those things, but let's see. Same things I talked about with PJ Washington. Try that with Najee Marshall too. Have him attack a closeout. Have him take the ball after he gets a rebound on defense and push it in transition and see what happens. Have him try a couple things like that. And they also need to push his shot too, because his shot is maybe even more shaky than what PJ's was. Because he shot, Najee's played 4 years in the NBA. He played all 4 with the Pelicans. He shot 35% his first year on 2.5 threes a game. You're like, okay, pretty good. Rookie year. Feel good about that. Undrafted. Then next year on 2 a game, he shot 20%. Like tanked all the way. 55 games, he shot 20% from 3. Like for totals, what he shot. He made 21 of 105 threes. He made 21 threes in 55 games. Not good. Like that's a player you would go, man, okay, this guy can't shoot. The season after that, he took about 3 a game and he shot 30%. So got a little bit better, but not that much better. Still only made 66 in 77 games. And then last season, he ramped it up and was absolutely awesome. Shot 38.7% on 2.3 per game. Still didn't take a lot, but he made the ones that he was taking. And I think that is just massive. And I think it looked like he took smarter shots, better shots, and all that. He's going to get even better opportunities, more high quality looks with the Mavericks. And so hopefully that decision making that he changed from his third year to his fourth year is better, even more so better than when he comes to the Mavericks. And so they've got to test that shot, because that's something that they need to know. All the talk about the closing lineup and and all that, he can't be part of that if he can't shoot well. If he's struggling like he did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, shooting 20% from 3, the Mavs need to take a step forward. They don't need to take a step back. Him shooting 20% is not the replacement for Derrick Jones Jr. No matter how good his defense could be better than Derrick Jones Jr. If he shoots worse than Derrick Jones Jr. from 3, it's a step back as a lineup. It just is. So he's definitely one. Coming up, Quentin Grimes and Dereck Lively also need to be tested. Their capabilities need to be tested. Dereck Lively absolutely has to do one thing for the Mavericks next season, and I'll tell you what that is coming up.
believe you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp helps you when you have stuff that you need to talk about in life. Everybody has things that are just going on, things that you cycle through in your head. You're like, man, I just don't know how I'm going to get through this, how I can work through this. Maybe it's the loss of, a friendship. I've had friendships that have just changed, where all of a sudden you're doing a podcast every day with somebody and then they leave you. And then all of a sudden you're just doing it by yourself one day randomly on Sunday, September 8th. And then you're just like, he's just not here anymore. And so maybe you need to talk to somebody about that. So if you need to talk to somebody about something like that, completely hypothetical, try therapy and give BetterHelp a try with your therapy. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Luka Doncic, Luka Doncic, Luka Doncic, Luka Doncic.
All right, Isaac, let's talk about the things the Mavericks absolutely need to do this season. I've talked about a couple of them already. They need to win, find the closing lineup, find their top 9. They needed to test out their new players' capabilities with PJ Washington and Najee Marshall. PJ's still a new player for the Mavericks. You can't forget that. Quentin Grimes, another player that is new to the Mavericks, they need to test out. One of the things he said in his introductory press conference was that, one of the things he wants to do is to get back to being more of a playmaker like he was in college and high school. So, hey, same thing we said about PJ and Najee. When you get a rebound, push it. See what happens. When when somebody's closing out on you for the three and you don't have enough space to take a shot, attack it. See what happens. They've got to test that out with Quentin Grimes. He can handle the ball. He can put the ball down on the deck. You watch some of these, those runs and pro-am games or whatever and things like that. He can put the ball down. He's got some ability. And so let's test that out. Let's see what happens. They absolutely have to figure out what they have in him. Another thing he talked about was the playoff closeouts, knocking down, taking open shots, all that. They've got to test him, see what he's capable of. And defensively, for all three of these guys, Grimes, Najee Marshall, PJ Washington, that represents the 3 guys that are going to defend the perimeter guys the most next season, plus Klay. Well, I guess Klay you can try too. But these 3 guys, you got to see how good can they be. Can we just leave them on an island? Can you leave Najee Marshall or Quentin Grimes or PJ Washington on an island to guard SGA, to guard Anthony Edwards, to guard LeBron James? Bigger guards, smaller guards. See what happens. You got to test out all different types of things. They did this with PJ Washington last season. You saw it from early on. As soon as PJ Washington got traded to the Mavericks, Jason Kidd goes, all right, let's see what he's got. He put him on SGA. He put him on LeBron. He put him on everybody in between. He put him on all different types of players to try and see what he could come up with. And what Jason Kidd decided was that Derrick Jones Jr. would be better than PJ Washington. And so he decided Derrick Jones Jr. is the dirty work wing that guards the point of attack guy, and PJ Washington is the guy that guards the best wing. And it worked really well. Really, really well. So now what do they do? With this new configuration of guys, test to see what they're capable of and all that. With Dereck Lively, the Mavericks need to figure out how good he can be defensively. Maybe they don't figure that out exactly this year. He'll keep getting better. He's 21. Like, come on. But I think that one thing he absolutely has to do this season is start to take a couple threes. Doesn't have to take even maybe one a game, but maybe not even that. Just try it. He's got to take a couple, because I think that if you don't, then it gets harder and harder to add that to your game eventually. I think that he's got to take a couple. He did. He took 2 in the regular season last season. One against was it the Denver one was a designed play. And the one against the Pelicans was just like a heave. It wasn't even really, I don't even call it a 3. And then he made his first one, famously made his first one against the Celtics in game 4, where everything was going right for the Mavericks in every conceivable way. So they got to figure out what they've got in him defensively. And so they'll test him out and do all that. And I'm confident that they will do the same things they did in the playoffs, where they try him against guys. They try to see if they can leave him out on an island. They don't have to, panic switch back and all that. He's got to take a couple of threes. And I want to also see if he can do a little bit more in the post. How many post-ups do you think that Dereck Lively had last season in the regular season? Like post plays where he is in the post, has the ball, and puts it up. I was shocked by this number. I actually don't even think it's right. Like, I think I may want to go back and check it. Synergy, maps all these plays. And so they've got plays where the player is the roller. They've got plays where the player is, has the ball in their hands and all that. They map all this stuff, and they're pretty accurate. NBA teams, college teams, a lot of people use synergy. I go to play types and I go to post-ups for Dereck Lively. They counted 9 possessions last season where he posted up. That can't be right. There's no way that's right. It's got to be more than I can imagine more than 9 in my head. But they said it's only 9. Either way, it's a very low number. So can he do a little bit more in the post? Can we get him a little bit more here and there to be able to take advantage of smaller guys? Because the Mavericks are going to need an option where they take advantage of smaller players. Rudy Gobert, as much as we, can't stand Rudy Gobert, shouldn't be on the floor, all that. One of the reasons why he gets all the slander he does is because he can't take advantage of smaller players. You can go small against them. 2 years ago, in 2022, the Mavericks in the playoffs went small with Maxi Kleber at the 5. And Gobert couldn't take advantage of him in any way. Mavs could go even smaller, and it wouldn't matter on offense. Because Gobert couldn't take advantage in any way. He can't post up. He can't finish over the top. He can get fouled and go to the free throw line, and that's kind of it. So Dereck Lively, they've got to push him forward too. 2 obvious things that go with wins. Keep Luka healthy in the regular season. You have to do that this season. That's just a non-negotiable. Last season, he had a 36% usage percentage, which is actually down from a couple years. He was 2 years ago, he was averaging 37, 38%. So it was actually down last season. He was even more down in the playoffs, which is a good sign. He was number 1 in the NBA in usage last year. He was also essentially number 1 in minutes last season. He averaged 37.5 minutes, and DeMar DeRozan averaged 37.8 minutes. So he basically led the league in usage and minutes last season. Why do you think he was on the injury report every single game in the playoffs? He just can't handle that. Keep him healthy. See if they can limit his usage this season even more where he doesn't have to do as much. Steph Curry won MVPs. Giannis won MVPs where he was barely playing fourth quarters because the Mavs had taken care of business and they didn't have to play. And so his efficiency numbers looked great because he didn't have to push and push and push and do way more than he needed to. Kyrie keeping him healthy is absolutely part of this too. And so I think that's absolutely something they need to look at, but there's not much to talk about there. It's just, hey, can Dinwiddie run a couple more possessions? Can Hardy do a little bit? Can Exum do a little bit? And then all of a sudden, Luka and Kyrie don't have to do absolutely everything every time. Then maybe that helps them keep healthy. Last thing I'll talk about is the Mavs on WFAA and Tegna. So the Mavs are now going to be on WFAA and this channel called KMPX, which is channel 29 if you live in DFW and if you live in the local area. And so that's going to be free over the air. All you have to do is go buy an antenna from Amazon or whatever. They're like $20, $30 or something, and then attach it to your TV, and then you got free digital games. You can watch the Mavericks like that. Super cool. Don't have to pay for a Bally service and all that. Couple quick frequently asked questions about this whole thing. There's going to be a minimum of 15 games on actual Channel 8 WFAA, and every single game, including the ones that are going to be on WFAA, are going to be on this KMPX. KMPX right now is channel 29. I think it's like Estrella or something like that. I looked at it. It's not on YouTube TV, but WFAA and the Mavericks say that they're going to rebrand this channel. They're going to take all the Spanish language channel, like content on it and move it somewhere else. And then they'll rebrand it and they'll distribute this wider. So I hope that means they're taking this KMPX and putting it on YouTube TV, because if not, then what are we all doing here, right? So that's something that will hopefully happen. They specifically said KMPX distribution or channel position is likely to change between now and the start of the season to give to give the most possible fans the opportunity to watch games. That's their whole goal in all this. That's why you do this. But I think one other thing the Mavericks want to do is to create a streaming service. You've seen what the Clippers are going to do, the Jazz are going to do. Brad Townsend reported that obviously, this is tremendous news for fans of being on WFAA, but for those wondering if they can get the direct-to-consumer streaming games like what the Stars are doing. The Dallas Stars have their own streaming app right now, where they're partnering with the streaming app and they're streaming all their games on a service they can subscribe to. The Mavericks hope that they will be in a place sometime this season. It's a subject they plan to broach at next week's Board of Governors meeting. So the Mavericks are going to present this. They're going to try to start their own streaming service. They've got to present it to the Board of Governors. I expect it to go through, but they've got to figure that out this season. Figure out streaming. Last thing the Mavericks need to do. It's not on the court. It's off the court. They got to figure that out this season. So there you go. That's what the Mavericks absolutely need to do this season. Got to figure out their streaming. They got to keep Luka and Kyrie healthy, push Lively forward, test new players' capabilities, find their top 9, find the closing lineup, and win. Win, 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 win. This week on Locked On Mavs, big announcement. Tuesday night, Slightly and I are going to go live on YouTube. So if you listen to the podcast, I love that you listen to the podcast. Keep listening to the podcast. Don't switch to YouTube. I actually make more money if you listen on the podcast. So I appreciate each and every one of you podcast listeners a lot. But if you listen on the podcast, check the YouTube on Tuesday night. Slightly and I are going to go live, and we're going to do some Mavs stuff, and we want just as many people as possible to join in and to join us for this new thing that we're doing with Locked On Mavs. Reggie's leaving, and so we've got to change some things up. And now all of a sudden we got some competition, so we got to do some things, and we have vowels, guys. So. No, love all those guys at DLLS and all that. And we'll also go back and forth, and I'll go on their show, and they'll come on ours and all that kind of stuff this season. But, so Tuesday night, we're going to go live on YouTube, so subscribe to that. We're trying to get to 50,000 subscribers. I think we're at 38,000 right now. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs and hanging out. Be here the rest of the week. I'll have content throughout the rest of it. And then, man, we're ramping up to training camp and all that. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.